Welcome back, everyone, and it's a great pleasure to have this session now on energy security in Europe. This, of course, coincides with the fact that Repower EU, so the detailed plans from the European Commission on how it is going to drive European policies in terms of reducing the dependence on Russian gas and Russian oil is going to be presented in Brussels in 25 minutes' time. Much of it has been leaked already, but it is obviously a big session for the Commission to show itself and to show that it is we are not going to see even more coal coming back in production, but it is truly a green pivot. We have yet another extraordinary panel here with us, and you're all very, very welcome. And if we start on screen here, Olena Pavlenko, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yes, I can. Hello.
Excellent. Olena Pavlenko is the founding director for a long time, been running an energy think tank in Kiev. Olena is currently in the middle of the night calling in from Washington. With the strong encouragement by her government, she has just for a couple of weeks left Kiev to be in Washington and spend her days talking to American politicians about what is going on in her country. And we're really glad that she's also joining us. And Olena, we should not say anything before conveying from this conference, from this assembly and so on, the reassurance to you that everyone's extraordinary solidarity and interest in being supportive of you and your fellow countrymen. Also, one of the first things that Olena has, in a sense, allowed me to do when we started conversations soon after the war broke out, and I should say she has written a number of policy papers since the war broke out on how to reduce the dependence on Russian gas, what is the role of commodity trade, what is the role of big oil, and what can now be the role of renewables in building back. And one of the things that Olena has in a sense given us allowed us to do is to say, yes, there are absolutely awful things happening in our country, but fellow friends abroad, it's okay to start to look at the future and how we rebuild our country. And we need to have that conversation now because we need to be ready now and get on with it. I don't want to talk on your behalf, but I wanted everyone to know that Olena has a very strong view in that direction.
Thank you very much, dear Jonas, for your kind words. Thank you very much, dear participants and everybody who supports Ukraine now in this difficult time. And I will be more than happy to share my thoughts on rebuilding Ukraine. And I also would say to make Europe more prosperity and more safe in the future.
Fantastic. We'll come back to you, Olena, and we hope to have an interactive conversation. We've got obviously here Beatriz Corredor Sierra, who's the president of Red Eléctrica Española, which is the big power utility. It's a listed company here in Spain, and at part of the logistical, the practical breakthrough, if you like, to make the transition happen here. Obviously, we have Heather Grubb, who is the director of Open Society European Policy Institute, and we first met, I think, 20 years ago talking about European security policy. It's great to meet you again. And then obviously for you, Andrew needs no further introduction now. Let's start with a few of prepared remarks by Beatriz. And if you'd like to use the podium, please.
So good morning, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, attendants. There are panelists, Jonas, Heather, Andrew, coming from Australia and UK and Stockholm and Sweden, maybe, Jonas. And my special and warm greetings to Olina, who is joining us from Washington, but she is from Ukraine. The resistance and resilience of the Ukrainian people is setting an example to us all. So thank you for being here. As you may know, Red Eléctrica is not a utility company itself because we are the Spanish TSO, so we are the transmission system operator, but we are not generating, we are not selling, we are not buying any electricity. So we are neutral and independent from the generators of electricity. And we've been involved with the European TSO community, DR Olina, in the emergency electricity connection of Ukraine and Moldova to the European continental system, successfully completed on March 16th, a year before schedule. So now Ukrainian people are no more dependent on Russian grid. So very welcome to this continental electricity grid. Thanks so much for giving me the opportunity to address these few words to this audience of this Green Hydrogen Global Assembly exhibition. Congratulations for the organization. First and foremost, I would like to highlight how timely this debate is. Today, we are expecting the publication of the new European Commission communication that is to spell out how Europe is to cope this energy emergency crisis and how high hydrogen is helping us out. We are currently going through an unpredictable, multifaceted crisis. Firstly, the geopolitical one, the unjustified, unprovoked, and unfair military aggression from Putin against Ukraine. Also, the economic crisis that is hampering the recovery after COVID, unprecedented levels of public debt, high inflation figures, lack in the supply chain, raw materials and food shortage, rising of inequality levels, populism, social discomfort. And the climate crisis, temperature rising, more frequent extreme weather events, losses in biodiversity, health threats and risks. Fulfilling the Paris Agreement to keep the rise of global temperatures at 1.5 degrees Celsius is a matter of urgent action. And of course, at the head of this perfect storm, the energy crisis. The war has highlighted Europe's biggest structural weaknesses, our energy dependency. Europe imports nearly 40% of our gas, 25% of our oil needs, and 42% of our coal from Russia. Therefore, talking about fossil dependency means Russian dependency. Overcoming such a reality in a very short time seems a difficult task, but there is also an opportunity to take new and faster steps toward decarbonization. Green hydrogen provides a unique lever for this. Hydrogen is needed to decarbonize hard-to-abate sectors which cannot be electrified, such as maritime transport, aviation, or heavy industrial processes that require intense supplies of electricity. In Spain, in 2021, 47% of electricity generation mix had a renewable origin. In 2030, this figure needs to rise to 74%, and new technologies like hydrogen are needed to achieve these goals. For electricity TSOs, hydrogen represents three new opportunities. On one hand, hydrogen is a new source of demand. As you all know, the electrolysis process needs lots of power to properly function. TSO are a neutral infrastructure to let medium and small companies that cannot afford their own electrolyzers to efficiently integrate their surplus of renewable energy generation. On the other hand, hydrogen is storable and therefore may play a role as huge battery and a key flexibility tool. Finally, the long-term vision of coupling implies a joint planning of both electricity grids and hydrodats. As Red Eléctrica, we understand that electricity TSOs are called to play a significant role in the deployment of hydrogen infrastructures. Huge electrolyzers should be directly connected to the electricity grid, integrating all available renewable energy generation, avoiding any waste of energy coming from solar and wind power plants. The location of electrolyzers should be decided, optimizing their potential to overcome issues as storage, transport, and green origin certification. Let me congratulate the Green Hydrogen Organization for your accurate paper on green hydrogen standards. As said, an increase of electricity demand is expected. Therefore, the reinforcement of the transmission electricity grid is needed to ensure the stability and security of the system and the quality of the supply. Finally, should no market actors be interested in owning, developing, managing, or operating electrolyzers, TSOs should be the key players that grant this right. We understand that the regulatory framework on hydrogen, which still needs to be approved, should integrate the strengths of TSOs. War in Ukraine has accelerated the policy shift, started with the Green Deal and in the Fit for 55 package, intensifying the decarbonization agenda and accelerating deadlines to achieve it. Today, the European Commission will update 15 minutes the REPowerEU plan, which will dedicate a separate chapter to green hydrogen. To achieve these figures, infrastructures are needed. Hydrogen gasoducts will be included as projects of common interest, which will receive the Commission's support. There is a need to scale up technology and to support the industry as well. The Commission is likely to announce its support to the industry along the whole supply chain with new tools to be enhanced, regulatory measures, financial facilities, public and private investment, faster and easier permitting procedures, sandboxes, awareness campaigns. The war in Ukraine will not change the course that Europe has set to a decarbonized society. On the contrary, this war only accelerates the pace in which we are to get our common goals. By exposing our most structural weaknesses, something needs to be done quickly. Hydrogen, as we have seen, has a great potential, notably in those hard-to-abate sectors, but as this technology is still in its childhood, bigger and determined efforts will be done to speed up this industrial new sector. For this reason, a firm policy must be put in place as soon as possible to incentivize this deployment. We hope that today's Commission communication goes in this particular direction. Spain, that already produces half of its electricity from renewable sources, is well placed to be a key European hub to develop and deploy this technology along its whole value chain. As an electricity TSO, we, Red Eléctrica, think that the upcoming gas and hydrogen regulatory framework should take into account TSO's strengths. As pump storage infrastructures, the system operator should be entitled to own and operate electrolyzers as a flexibility tool of the electricity system. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Heather, would you mind picking up the baton a little bit in the sense, Beatrice set the stage in terms of just the enormity of the energy import from Russia. What does this new situation mean?
We will hear, as you were pointing out, Jonas, in just a few hours this very morning, what the EU has planned through the REPowerEU program. Now, the key thing about this package is it's really focused on energy security. Europe has had an enormous shock of having to suddenly rebuild its energy security policy from the ground up in the last months. And that's been a tremendous and important incentive to get out of fossil fuels, both Russian, but also others, and to think very differently about the whole energy system. And you can't let crises like these go to waste. It's really important to start setting the right incentives and starting to set the right standards for the future energy system of the EU. And I think what we're likely to see in the package is definitely some steps forward, but also some important constraints for green hydrogen. So in terms of steps forward, there's likely to be a high level of ambition. Frans Timmermans has already indicated this at the Global Hydrogen Summit in Rotterdam that he spoke out on the 10th of May. The Commission, I think, will be pushing hard for green hydrogen as a means of security, particularly because of the possibility of storage and preventing the problems of the Dunkelflaute, as the Germans call it, where there's a lack of sun and wind on a particular day, and also from season to season. So the security side is extremely appealing to the EU from green hydrogen. But the problem is that the renewables are not there yet. They're really not there, even for the ambitions currently set, let alone the kind of levels that the enthusiasts here would like to see. I mean, the Commission has so far been saying that they want to get to 40 gigawatts of electrolyzers by 2030. I think that ambition will go up, that level will go up. But at the moment, there's only 30% of the renewables capacity to produce that available, not just in Europe, but globally to actually produce that. So this question of supporting renewables build out, I think, has to be the the other side, the parallel campaign, in addition to the revivalist meeting that we're hearing on green hydrogen here. And there are some perils there. So one peril, and this is where I think the green hydrogen standard announced yesterday is incredibly important. One parallel is that green hydrogen becomes the get out of jail free card for the fossil fuel industry. We're seeing a huge amount of lobbying in Brussels now by the gas industry saying, it's fine to build new gas infrastructure in Europe. That's not a problem. You know, let's build new LNG terminals, let's build new pipelines. It's all good, because then it will carry hydrogen in the future, green hydrogen. So just build as much as you like, and we'll start adding hydrogen into the gas supply already, right? Because that will green our gas supply. And then we'll just swap one molecule for the other. Really no problem. Now, there are huge problems with this, as all of you who know the technical and the physics of hydrogen know. Huge problems with the fact that hydrogen is a very tiny molecule, which actually just can't go through existing gas pipes. But it's a huge waste of hydrogen, the champagne of energy supply, to just mix it with gas. This does not, in fact, green it in terms of overall carbon footprint or indeed water footprint. And of course, what it does is to lock Europe into essentially gas infrastructure for another generation, which is the aim of this lobbying. So I think that's one of the biggest dangers for the green hydrogen cause, for the evangelists of green hydrogen, is that it becomes another form, not just of greenwashing, but of locking in, not just to basically to grey hydrogen, and that grey hydrogen could be the biggest winner of the supposed push for green hydrogen. Okay, so that's a big political danger. The other constraint that really needs addressing is this issue of renewables build out, which is an enormous challenge, which has been discussed. So I won't go into it in great detail. But one of the ideas that you hear quite commonly about green hydrogen is, well, we can support renewables build out because the hydrogen, basically green hydrogen, makes it so much more profitable that then you build it in North Africa and you feed European markets, or you build it elsewhere and you feed European markets, you ship it around the world. It's a way of commodifying solar energy, essentially. Well, yes, to an extent, but two things really to think about here. One is that actually it's a lot more complicated than that technically, and been much better to use renewables directly where you can, and especially to use them to meet local needs. The fossil fuel industry has trashed many parts of the globe over the past 100 years, putting in infrastructure not benefiting, that doesn't benefit local populations, and in fact causes massive environmental degradation. And there's a real risk that, again, the same kinds of infrastructure and the same kinds of commercial deals are used in the same way, that basically takes local water, particularly in water scarce regions. Think about North Africa, which is going to face massive water scarcity over the next decade or so. And so the need to use renewables to do desalination is critical. Very good if green hydrogen can help to build that. But if then green hydrogen production then takes the water away from meeting local needs, and including for agriculture, for example, this just replicates the same old colonial era relationships of using up local resources in order to produce something which is then shipped across the world to benefit people in the rich world. This isn't going to work. So green hydrogen has to be part of the story of regional decarbonization. And there were some great points on that yesterday about Namibia. Namibia is a great example of this. You don't think about Namibia and South Africa as country plans, as has often happened. We've seen at COPs, for example. This is a message for the Egyptian delegation thinking about coming up to COP27. It's not just about country plans. It's about regional decarbonization plans, whereby Namibia can help to decarbonize Southern Africa and move South Africa in particular out of coal. So great points on that. Yes, that's a fantastic story for Namibia. It's a fantastic story for Southern Africa. It needs to be part of a regional decarbonization plan, which is not just about making a commodity that can be shipped to the US and to Europe. And particularly this question of getting water right. There's renewables production, but there's also the water side of it, making sure that there is enough water for local needs to increase the water supply, because as temperatures rise and as sea levels rise, the quantity of fresh water available globally is going to be under enormous pressure. And any industry which is taking water, which is a big user of water, as green hydrogen is, has got to have an incredibly good story to tell and a very high standard to reach. So I would argue for the green hydrogen standard set. Yes, focus on the carbon footprint, absolutely, but focus also on the water footprint, because water is going to be the biggest source of resource conflicts going forward. So these are areas where I think the green hydrogen standard is set by industry, working with civil society, working with other governments is key to pushing back on the lobbying that we're seeing from the fossil fuel industry and other corporates. European Union, in the end, is a giant compromise machine. We'll see that with Repower EU later this morning. Some steps forward, some steps back. But holding the EU to a high standard from the industry side through the green hydrogen standard is incredibly important, because that will help politicians who want to do the right thing, like Frans Timmermans, to do it and to push back against the lobbying. Thanks.
Well, thank you so much for that, Heather. On that last note, Andrew, you've been doing precisely that, trying to help Frans Timmermans to do what he wants to do, and you've been crisscrossing Europe since war broke out here. Over to you.
Yeah, look, thank you. Look, I've got some. I'm the kind of bacon and the egg in the pan here, and I enjoyed all your comments as a very intelligent observer, but I just want to bring you onto my side of the field. I've been to the Congo, the DRC. I've been all through Black Africa. I can assure you that that water will be no issue here. Even if we desalinate the ocean, there's a fair bit of that. It's going to be more apparently. It adds about 0.5 cents a kilo to the cost of hydrogen, or less. So, you know, if you presented us with this glass of water, we'd have to desalinate that. I mean, we have to have pure hydrogen and oxygen. So you're desalinating regardless. So I just want to remove that off the table. If some moron goes into a village and taps into the wells and the village dies of thirst, well, you know, they obviously are evil people. But I'm not seeing I'm not witnessing any of that behavior. So I just want to put that one to bed quickly. In all the discussions we've had around the world, we're in 36 countries, people have said to take it from wastewater, take it from seawater, or take it from this huge river. You know, we don't mind. And we've said, well, not a we, because we're going to desalinate anyway. I just think, you know, the oil and gas lobby, and I'm not sure you didn't get your information from there, but they're very clever how they get information out, misinformation out. Have been spreading this, oh my God, if green hydrogen gets going, we're going to run out of water. That is, as a scientist, a complete misnomer. The world water balance never changes. Doesn't matter what happens to it. It's fixed. Okay, it goes to steam, it goes to ground, it goes, you know, what we will probably do is make a little bit more water available, because when you burn a truckload of oil and gas, you get a truckload of carbon. But when you burn a truckload of green hydrogen, you get a truckload of water. So, you know, I actually see zero harm here. And as an ecologist, we're right over this. But also, this is not an environmental panel, this is an energy security panel. And I just want to say to everyone what a great former Prime Minister said, yet you might not be that interested in war, but war is very interested in you. And if you think that's completely impossible, can I just say, so did the people of Crimea and the Ukraine. I'm fairly heavily invested in this. The first time Bloomberg had ever heard globally the word blood money for people who keep investing in Russia was from me. I've worn the Ukrainian flags the instant those tanks crossed the border. And we're doing everything we can as both a foundation and as a business to help the people of Ukraine. And I'd like to say that the German government, I mean, you know, everyone has a bit of a crack at the German government, but they are in a really difficult position and they are being tremendously brave. My first discussions with the German government was, how can we fully replace Russian gas, 52, 53 billion cubic meters a year? And I said, well, actually, and I don't want to simplify a huge problem, but I want to take you to some hard facts. Actually, if you want to really slow things up for the Kremlin, to make all their gigantic ambitions to repeat the so-called success of Peter the Great, you could call him Peter the Butcher, but Victor's write the history, so he's called Peter the Great. If you've got a person in the Kremlin who wants to repeat Peter the Great and to take over large swathes of Europe, the right way to do it is to keep sending him $1 billion a day. You'll get your wish. He's going to take all that money and he's going to use it against you. The German government were onto that straight away. And they said to us, we need calorific value equivalent, which happens to be the whole 15 million tons, which we have in our budget by 2030, which of course isn't responsible just to give to one country. And so we have compromised at 5. But I say this, where their logic is coming from is bulletproof. You don't pay, if you're a government, for a huge unforeseen cost from next year's budget. You know, that's already spent. You've got to drag it out of future revenues, projected expenditure, forward budget estimates, it's called technically. Now, this war had a budget for our intelligence, about 15 to 18 billion, be over by day 3. 2 weeks later, it had gone through 30 billion. Okay. 80 days later, it's spiraling out of control. Now, while we continue sending $1 billion a day, it's probably going to be all right for Russia. But the Germans were right. If we fully replace that gas with hydrogen gas from a renewable sector, and I do want to say, and I really loved your speaker, and you're a fantastic intellect, but I do want to say 40 gigawatts, I can't buy lunch with 40 gigawatts, right? I mean, if you're talking 40 gigawatts, we shouldn't hold this conference. You know?
That's the EU's ambition, not my personal.
Yeah, and we're working on that hopeless ambition. Why don't we just plan for failure and undershoot it? I mean, you know, we'll get there. I mean, we'll achieve our goal. Let's go for failure. So we have, as the Hydrogen Council, 100 million tons of hydrogen by 2030. So that's
At
hundreds.
least.
What's that?
At least.
At least. So it's hundreds and hundreds of gigawatts. So we're kicking off the world, you know, with 2 gigawatts going to 15 in our plans a year. It's not enough. We need to go so much bigger, and we're bringing the cost down massively. And there's strong technology becoming available now. There's about 4 technologies. If you want to win a horse race, you should back all 4 horses in the race. We're backing it, where you can split the water molecule in the solar panel. You can take off the hydrogen at atmospheric pressure and temperature in plastic pipes, if you want to hate plastic, but you can. And we just don't know quite how to commercialize that, but those technologies are there, and we're working hard on commercialization. Zero moving part in wind turbines is there. Towers which use 20% of the current steel and current cement for wind towers is emerging. These technologies are coming with us. So I'm seeing, and I really want to put this out there, that I'm not a greeny, airy-fairy, romantic person, tie myself to a tree. I'm a hardcore pragmatist. I'm a business person, and I'm a deep conservationist. You don't have to be segmentized. You can have 2 truths, 3 truths, or 4 truths, all in the same. So I am seeing serious change coming. And it's based on the fact that electricity has only ever come from fossil fuel. And if we keep it, as you observed so beautifully, you know, if you've got $1 billion a year available to you, and that's just the American Petroleum Association, you're pumping that billions of dollars into lobbying politicians or worse, then you're going to have a hell of an influence. And Europe suffers the same thing. You've got a very rich fossil fuel sector, and they're not giving you the community voice. I can tell you they're cutting it off quick. And thank you for pointing that out, because we need the community to speak. And why should you speak with such confidence? Because we're proven as a world that there's a brand new, massive, cheap source of energy, and it's green, it's renewable, it undercuts coal easily, takes its lights out. Now, when you've got that, now you can consider making hydrogen not as a chemical for the chemical industry or for the space agency industries, but for common fuel. And it's only possible because you've got this breakthrough cost in electricity, which means you can split the water molecule and make hydrogen very cheaply. And all we have to do now is make it at scale. And I need the think tanks and the politicians to really support us on this, because without you, because everyone here listened to you and your logic was bulletproof and you're a great leader. What we both now need is courage. We have to have courage. We really need to take risk here. If we're just going to back what we already know, we're not going to make any change. So I'm asking the European Union, you've got heavy fat subsidies on fossil fuel. If you want to make sure the world stays with fossil fuel, you're doing it beautifully. But why not put the same subsidy on renewable fuel? We're not going to suddenly consume 2 bottles of water or drive twice the amount. It's not going to cost you any more, but what you are doing is leveling the playing field. If you're going to subsidize fossil fuel, you subsidize pollution-free fuel. It's simple, right? It's logical. Why wouldn't you do it? Well, you wouldn't do it because you're in a fossil fuel sector saying, don't do it. Well, remember why you're there. You're there to lead and lead.
Thank you very much. We're running a little bit late to time, but finally, is there one person that has courage? We know it's Olena. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Jonas. Dear colleagues, first of all, I want to express my gratitude again to all the support Ukraine gets from its partners in Europe and in the US. This war is not just about the victory of those who has more weapons. This is a battle of values, and Ukraine is fighting for European values such as freedom, independence, human rights, and tolerance to each other. When Ukraine wins, so will these values. As of now, the war continues, and Ukraine needs constant financial and political support from Europe and the world. Please continue to help us. The Russian war has a clear energy dimension. Last year, by manipulating the volume of gas supplies to the EU, Russia influenced the sharp rise in gas prices for European countries and demanded the launch of Nord Stream 2. This year, during the war, the Russian authorities are constantly threatening Europe to cut off from gas supplies, and they are already putting a pressure on Poland and Bulgaria. Just an hour ago, our transmission system operator reported that Gazprom does not even use the reserved capacity to transport gas to the EU, which means again the blackmail of Europe. But Russian gas war has taught us many lessons. For example, the lessons that Europe cannot be dependent on energy export from authoritarian countries, and diversification must be in practice, not just on paper. And also there is another side of this coin. Due to the fact that Russia uses energy resources as a weapon, Europe now has a great motivation, not only to quickly give up Russian oil and gas, and to say the truth, this is what Ukrainians hope to hear from the European Union soon, but also to think about how to reduce fossil fuel imports even faster than planned. And thank you very much, dear participants, dear speakers, that you are already talking about this. Many EU member states are already launching hydrogen production projects. I think those countries who are the most dependent on Russian gas can invest most actively in such technologies. And actually, Andrew stated this. And for example, Germany, while looking for the alternative to Russian gas sources, may at the same time think about how to reduce gas import and more actively switch to new hydrogen technologies. And I'm sure that other countries will take this initiative and strengthen it. Ukraine can help Europe with such a transition to new technologies. Yes, as of now, our sector requires a lot of investment. The loss of national energy infrastructure has already exceeded $2 billion. This figure increases by hundreds of millions of dollars every month. In many regions, infrastructure is damaged or destroyed to zero. But I'm really glad that there is a consensus in Ukraine that the reconstruction of the energy sector should take into account the goals of decarbonization. The government has already made a public statement that we are going to completely abandon fossil fuels. Ukraine plans coal phase out as soon as possible, and a new thermal generation will be built on new technologies. Hydrogen production and consumption will be part of these new technologies. The EU's hydrogen strategy mentions Ukraine as a country where hydrogen production will be supported. Before the war, many companies were already trying to develop projects to produce green hydrogen in the south and east of Ukraine. Ukrainian gas transport and distribution companies also have launched a number of research on the ability to transport gas through Ukraine. According to their estimates, the share of hydrogen in the mixture can already be up to 20%. That is, when the process of rebuilding the country begins, hydrogen initiatives in Ukraine will not start from scratch. But it is important that the international partners bring the best standards to Ukraine, to work safely, to ensure transparency and reporting, to be safe in environmental protection. And this will be the best contribution to the construction of energy future, not only in Ukraine, but also in full Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elena. I hope you can hear the applause. We need to finish soon, but can we maybe have just a super quick comment from all of you here? We know today the package is coming out in Brussels. It doesn't go far enough. Andrew has been clear about that. Heather has been clear about that. Beatrice has been clear about that. It's a compromise machine. How do we make our politicians be bolder? In a sense, what do we do because it is going to be painful for all of us, for the European citizens. What else can we do to quicken it up? Heather first, or Beat, whoever, please.
Okay, just a couple of ideas, and I'm sure Beatrice has a lot to add, particularly from the point of view of the transmission side. It's actually really important to understand how that's working. So I think there are three ways in which this can be speeded up and to get the politics right, because I think Andrew said earlier, the politics is not the important thing. The thing is to get the production going. But the politics really matters because that's what's going to set the incentives, which also includes setting the prices. And that is what will drive the industry. And there are three aspects of the politics that really need attention. One is simply getting the renewables built. This is an enormous challenge, even for a wealthy continent like Europe. The renewables build up. At the moment, the supply chains are completely controlled by China, and even China does not have enough of the resources to do the scale of renewables build out, which is clearly needed in order for this to happen. If you look at the calculations that have been made by, for example, Kaya, an independent consultancy that's been looking into this in some detail, for the even with the Repower EU proposals on permitting, for example, building it out at scale is going to be an enormous challenge. Second thing is, this can't be just something that happens in one place. I mean, you're pointing out, Andrew, how this is really a global issue and it needs to be thought about globally as well. But that means bringing people on board. And so my points about water and local needs are as much about people, when they see new infrastructure being built, they want to know it's also going to meet their local needs for power and for water. Okay,
Sure.
And that's the key thing, that green hydrogen has got to be green, and it's also got to be red in terms of social impact. So actually increasing that is a really key part of also getting the European Union to think about it as an international project. It's not just something for Europe to serve European needs, it's an international project which has got to meet, and the renewable electricity which is built in other continents needs to meet local needs first. And then the fantastic points made by Olena about the opportunities of rebuilding, to rebuild on a different basis. And I would argue that actually one of the first things that Europe could do for Ukraine and for green hydrogen at the beginning is to bring Ukraine into the European Green Deal fully. Green membership of the EU is actually the most important part of membership for Ukraine. And so bringing in, that gives Ukraine access to finance under the European Green Deal. It makes Ukraine part of the European Hydrogen Accelerator Plan, and it allows the building of new capacity, in the reconstruction of Ukraine in Europe itself, both to meet the local needs in Ukraine and also for export. And these are things that can happen now within the capital that's available, and which will clearly need, there needs to be more for Ukraine, but it needs to be there. And that's what I was saying about having a regional solution. We can't think about it country by country. It's got to be across the whole region. And
across the region and across to Olena. Did you want to pick up on that? I think we have lots of plans how to work together with your government. Is there one last 30-second message?
Yes, I fully support the membership of Ukraine in the Green Deal. Definitely, that was our government is asking for, I think, last 2 years. I also would like to state that, again, in Ukraine, there were a lot of small projects which started to try to develop and understand how the hydrogen can be produced in Ukraine. And one of the best steps which Europe can do to support further hydrogen development is to support such projects. At the level of the research and development, at the level of testing, just support competition, support the small ideas, and then you will have a really, really great new, absolutely fantastic projects in the future.
Thank you very much. Great. Beatrice, over to you. One key message from your vantage point.
We need a stronger interconnection system in the electricity grids in Europe. If we don't have that interconnection,
and how do we get to it?
Well, we are well prepared. We know we are a peninsula. We are just at the end, at the edge of European. Yes. We are working in a bigger interconnection with France. This is necessary to integrate all the renewable energy that coming from Iberia to Europe. And this is the first step, I think, to speed that. And it's possible because it's about permitting, because the technology is developed, not so the technology about hydrogen. But I think Europe is prepared to make a local industry. Spain has been able to develop a local industry in wind-powered plants. So if we can't do it, Europe can do it.
Yeah. Lastly, Andrew.
Thank you. Look, really great panel, and I've enjoyed it very much. If there's simply one word of advice, I'd say either eliminate the subsidies across the board, and then you'll see from a political perspective what will happen. You'll see a collapse in fossil fuel production and a rise in price. Now that'll decrease the standard of living. So to think about that for a moment, you take those huge subsidies off, fossil fuel industry starts shrinking quickly. Now you've got an increase in standard of living cost. You're much better off just saying, okay, if we're going to subsidize fossil fuels, then put the same subsidies on green fuel and at least level the playing field. It won't cost you another cent. But you have to see through the massive smokescreen of the huge amount of expensive lobbying which is directed at you, which you've so wisely pointed out. Look for the sleight of hand, don't look for the hand when people are talking about building more fossil fuel to help the green hydrogen industry. That's complete rubbish. We don't need their help. We need them to get out of the road.
Thank you very much. On that note, thank you all. And the next panel starts in a couple of minutes in this room. Thank you.